Hello my dear students and welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to discuss a topic, homeostasis. This topic is under head of coordination and control, and this topic is for the students of GCE O Levels and IGCSE who are taking their exams through Cambridge board. But today's discussion will also help the students of Edexcel, AQA and OCR students who are taking their exams through GCSE or IGCSE through Edexcel board. Homeostasis, that is a mechanism of maintaining internal body environment. Internal environment, why? Because our internal environment is influenced by the external environment. Whenever there is any change that is occurring around us, that will definitely influence our body's internal environment, and it fluctuates. And when internal environmental fluctuate, so that will affect the cellular activities as temperature change, pH change, or change in water concentration, or even change in glucose concentration may affect the enzyme activity, respiratory activity, or certain other metabolic processes. So it is very important that our internal environmental factors, they must be operating at their set points or at their set ranges, so that enzyme activities, whether it is respiration, whether it is protein synthesis, whether it is hydrolysis, whether it is deamination, every activity is occurring at its best. So in order to maintain internal environment, so there is a negative feedback mechanism operating all the time. This negative feedback mechanism is working in such a way that if due to external environment influence any bodily parameter, it rises above the set point, so bodily organ are all associated factors. They operate in such a way that rising factor is brought back down to its normal limit, down to its set point. And similarly, if due to external environmental influences, any bodily parameter moves down or moves below the set point, so body organs work in a way to bring it back up to the set point. So in our today's discussion in the homeostatic control, we will be discussing three important parameters, three important body control we will be discussing. One is thermoregulation, that is maintaining body internal temperature. Second is maintaining blood glucose concentration, that what we call glucose regulation. And the third factor we will discuss about maintaining water level in the body, that what we call osmoregulation. So we are going to discuss these three areas one by one, but remember, we do not need to maintain internal environment in the whole body, in every tissue, every organ of the body. Rather, we maintain the conditions in the blood, and body is automatically adjusted to the set point. So now we are going to discuss one by one. Thermoregulation means maintaining body temperature. Our normal body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. In terms of Fahrenheit, it is 98.6. And this temperature may increase or may decrease considering to some external or internal stimuli. So we are going to discuss how our body temperature is maintained. And in the very first case, what we are going to discuss, this is hyperthermia. Means if the body temperature starts to increase above the set point. What are the possible reasons for the increase in body temperature? Number one, we are exposed to hot environment, means we are standing or we are working in the hot climate around, like it's a bright sunny day during summer, or it could be some workers working in the steel mill where there is a high temperature used to melt, or you can say used to heat up the steel or iron, or there is an excessive rate of respiration due to some athletic activity, due to some game, or due to some strenuous activity. In all these circumstances, body temperature may start to rise. How? When we are exposed to hot environment around, whether we are working in the hot sunny days or whether we are working in an environment where there is a high temperature around, like working in a steel mill. So our body absorbs heat from the surrounding and our body temperature starts to rise. And it starts to rise above 37 degrees Celsius. Similarly, when we are involved in some strenuous activity or some athletic activity, so rate of respiration starts to increase in our body muscles. So that increases the temperature, and that also causes an increase in our body temperature. Now we have to discuss, if body temperature increases, what serious implication it could cost on our normal body working. Like increase in temperature will result certain enzymes in our body cells, in our body tissues or organs. These enzymes are likely to denature and enzyme activity would collapse. Similarly, some of the important proteins that might be present in the cell membrane, that might be serving as pigments like hemoglobin or myoglobin in the muscle cells, or that might be working in the mitochondria. So these proteins may get denatured, and in that case, so working of the body organs or respiration would be badly affected. So it is duly required that body temperature should be maintained at optimum 37 degrees Celsius. So what happens when our body temperature starts to rise? At that time, we have got certain receptors, thermoreceptors, and these thermoreceptors are found in our skin, in our brain, and in our spinal cord. And these receptors detect the high temperature of the blood. Why? Because blood circulates throughout the body, and when the body gets heat up, so that heat is absorbed by the blood, by the water molecules in the blood, and this blood becomes hotter. And this is sensed by the thermoreceptors in the skin, in the brain, or in the spinal cord. These thermoreceptors, when detect that blood is getting hotter, so the first thing that is done is vasodilation. That arterioles in the skin dilate, that increase the diameter of the blood vessels in the skin, and more hot blood is allowed to pass through the skin. This will make the skin become hotter, and skin may lose heat to the surrounding by conduction, convection, and radiation. In certain circumstances, when environment is already hotter than our body, so conduction, convection, and radiations cannot operate at once. So sweating has to be induced by the sweat glands. Sweat glands are present in the skin, and these sweat glands become operative by increasing concentration of sodium chloride and urea in them. That reduces their osmotic potential, and the blood vessels that are passing nearby, they have the blood plasma with the higher water potential, and the water is also at high temperature. So down the water potential gradient from the capillaries around the sweat gland, water enters the sweat glands, and then it rises the sweat duct and reaches the sweat pore. When it reaches the sweat pore at the skin, water molecules, as they are at higher temperature, so they evaporate, causing the lower energy water molecules staying behind, and it will reduce the temperature. And as it is evaporation, and you know that evaporation causes cooling, so that helps in the reduction of the body temperature. This also reduces the immediate air temperature around the skin, so conduction, convection, and radiation also starts operating immediately. But if there is a colder environment around, so sweating is not necessarily needed. In this case, only conduction, convection, and radiation can be sufficient to reduce the body heat back to normal, back to 37 degrees Celsius. Just like you might have seen that when you are exercising during winter cold days, even though you are exercising extensively, but you do not start sweating. Why? Because environmental temperature is already very low than our body temperature. So conduction, convection and radiation are sufficiently operating to reduce the body temperature and maintain it at its normal. But during summer days, even the light is switched off, there is no electricity, no fan running, and we immediately start sweating because conduction, convection, radiation cannot be immediately operative because external environment is hotter than our body environment. At this time, this vasodilation supported by conduction, convection and radiation and sweating activity will help the body temperature stay at its normal, that is 37 degrees Celsius. And this activity continues to occur till we return to normal environmental temperatures, we return to normal bodily activities. The second case is hypothermia, means body temperature may start declining, and this could be due to certain reasons. The reasons include continuous exposure to cold environment where there is a very low temperature, particularly in winter days, or there is a reduced respiration due to some anemia or due to some low oxygen supply, or certain drug impacts could be there. So what would be the effect of low temperature on the body? When body temperature gets lower, enzyme activity will slow down, even the respiration may slow down, and body will not be able to generate sufficient energy in due time to maintain the body requirement. So this will cause a major collapse in the bodily metabolism. In order to avoid that, body temperature must be kept at its optimum level, that is 37 degrees Celsius. So what corrective measures are to be taken when body temperature starts to decline? Now coming back to the corrective measures, number one, vasoconstriction does take place, means blood vessels, arterioles in the skin, they constrict, their lumen diameter is reduced so that less blood is allowed to pass through the skin. So that will make the skin less hotter, and less heat loss is likely to occur through conduction, convection and radiation. Sweat glands are shut down, no sweating activity is taking place. So it means that hot water molecules in the blood, they will be retained within the blood, and that hot blood will be allowed to circulate deeply into the body rather than circulating near the skin. At this time, rector muscles, they contract and they pull the hair erect, and the erect hair over the skin, they trap an air cushion. The temperature of the air cushion is somewhat closer to the body temperature. This reduces the thermal gradient, and this thermal gradient will result in reduction of heat loss from the body, because near to the skin is the air cushion with the higher temperature, so heat loss is reduced. Then we are switched to certain other metabolic activities, like certain hormonal changes are likely to take place, like more adrenaline is being produced. So this more adrenaline will increase the rate of respiration of the body muscles, and that will produce more heat, and this heat will result in compensating for the heat loss and in increasing the body heat level and increasing the body temperature back to 37 degrees Celsius. At the same time, body tissues, body muscles, they switch to fat metabolism rather than staying at carbohydrate metabolism. Means fat molecules, when they are respired, they are comparatively providing more energy than carbohydrates and proteins. So switching from carbohydrate metabolism to fat metabolism increases energy production, heat production within the body, and that increased heat will result in maintaining the body temperature to 37 degrees Celsius. Like certain behavioral activities, wearing warm clothes, this also helps retaining heat around the body, and this also reduces the heat loss, and it helps in keeping the body warm to 37 degrees Celsius temperature. So over here in thermoregulation, we have discussed about how different activities are taking place to maintain the body temperature when we are exposed to hot environment around or when we are exposed to cold environment around. When we are likely to experience increased body temperature or when we are likely to experience a reduced body temperature. Now let's discuss control of blood glucose concentration. In our blood there is a consistent supply of glucose, and that glucose concentration is maintained between 80 to 120 milligram. And this glucose concentration must be maintained to ensure the continuous supply of glucose to each and every body cell. Body cells collect glucose from the blood and respire on this glucose. During respiration, the energy is generated, and this energy is generated in two forms, mainly ATP and heat. ATP is used for various activities like active transport, muscle contraction, nerve impulse stimulation and transmission, or other metabolic activities. Whereas heat generated is used to maintain the body temperature, and this helps enzyme activities occur at normal. Blood glucose concentration, if it is going above 120 or if goes below 80, so in both cases abnormalities may arise. For example, if blood glucose concentration increases above 120, it will decrease the water potential of the blood. So blood will fetch water from the nearby tissues and tissue fluid. That will cause crenation, shrinking of blood vessel, and it will also result a higher blood pressure as well. And similarly, if blood glucose concentration decreases below normal, so the very fatal impact would be that cells may not get required amount of glucose from the blood, and they might be starving for respiration. So it is required that blood glucose must be maintained all time within the due range in the blood, and this is homeostatically helped by pancreas. Within pancreas there is present a tissue known as islets of Langerhans, and this tissue contains two cells, alpha cells and beta cells. And both of the cells are producing two hormones, like alpha cells produce a hormone known as glucagon and beta cells produce a hormone known as insulin. Both of these hormones are being produced all time in a combination to help maintain blood glucose concentration in the optimum range. So there are two circumstances where blood glucose concentration may increase or may decrease. First of all, it is hyperglycemia, that is increase in blood glucose concentration. When we take a starch-rich meal or sugar-rich meal, so our blood glucose concentration starts increasing after an hour or two of meal intake. So blood glucose concentration starts to increase above 120. At that time, pancreas responds to this high glucose concentration in the blood in a way that alpha cells respond by decreasing the amount of glucagon being produced, and beta cells respond by increasing the amount of insulin released into the blood. This increased insulin will stimulate the liver cells and the muscle cells to increase glucose uptake, and the glucose these cells take up in excess, they respire on it and convert it into glycogen and store it. This will result blood glucose concentration reduce back to normal in the optimum range, and this will also help in maintaining a reserve of glucose in the muscle cells, in the liver cells in the form of glycogen, so that during meal interval time, this glycogen will be gradually hydrolyzed to release glucose for the bodily needs. But cells continue to take up glucose from the blood. This will result blood glucose concentration decreasing, and this is particularly happening during meal interval time. So when blood glucose concentration starts decreasing below set point, at this time alpha cells increase the production of glucagon, and beta cells in the pancreas, they stop the production of insulin. Glucagon travels through blood, reaches the liver cells and stimulates them to break down stored glycogen into glucose, and that is released into the bloodstream, and this results increase in the blood glucose concentration back to normal, and this ensures that continuous supply of glucose is maintained to the body cells, body tissues, and even to the brain. And similarly, under influence of glucagon, certain body tissues are also stimulated to respire more on fats rather than glucose, so that stress on the glucose respiration is reduced. This is how blood glucose concentration is continuously maintained right after a meal and even during meal interval times. There are certain circumstances that blood glucose concentration may continue to rise, and this is what we call diabetes. Certain diabetic people may have their blood glucose concentration increased without any known reason. There are two types of diabetes. One is type 1 diabetes, that is insulin dependent diabetes, and other is type 2 diabetes, that is insulin dependent diabetes. Over here we will discuss about insulin dependent diabetes, that is the type 1, and that is due to lack of insulin production. That insulin is not produced, and that's why blood glucose concentration stays high, because cells do not take up excess glucose and they do not convert it into glycogen and store. In that case, more of the glucose is lost along with the urine. So that's why the diabetic people, they have their blood glucose concentration remaining higher than the normal, and their urine also reflects high glucose concentration. So these people are normally advised to take low sugar diet, and they are also advised to have exercise and insulin injection. Now the third homeostatic control that we need to discuss is osmoregulation, means maintaining body water level. So osmoregulation is very important because our body cells contain at an average 70% of water, and this water is important for various metabolic activities, and particularly important when water is serving as a solvent and as a reaction medium. So a due water potential of the body fluids like blood plasma, tissue fluid, and the cytoplasm needs to be maintained all time. So there are certain circumstances when the water level in the body may decrease or may increase. Now our brain contains osmoregulatory organ that is also known as receptor, and this is hypothalamus, and hypothalamus is accompanied by a gland known as pituitary gland. Both of these components in the brain, they help in osmoregulation, in maintaining body water level, and they also have a support of kidney in that regard. Now consider two conditions here where water level, the first condition is that if the body is running short of water. So in that case, if there is a low water potential in the body, so tissue fluid will fetch water from blood plasma and blood water potential will decrease. Blood will become denser, thicker, and its flow speed may be affected. This is sensed by hypothalamus in the brain, and immediately pituitary gland releases a hormone known as antidiuretic hormone or ADH. This ADH travels through blood and reaches the kidney. Within the kidney, around the nephron, there are collecting ducts, and these collecting ducts are collecting urine from the nephron and delivering them into the renal pelvis region. But the cells that are lining the wall of the collecting duct, they have receptors for ADH. So ADH travels down the bloodstream and reaches the collecting duct, where ADH binds with the cells that are lining the wall of the collecting duct. When ADH binds to these cells become more permeable to water. The urine that is passing through the cavity of collecting duct, that urine has got higher water potential. So down the water potential gradient, water passes from urine into the cells and then from the cells into the nearby capillaries. In that case, the blood water potential will continue to rise gradually, because the water that is being absorbed from the urine is being delivered to the blood plasma running in the nearby capillaries, and it will continue until the blood water potential is increased back to normal. So if there is a water shortage and more water shortage in the body, more ADH is released by the pituitary gland. But gradually, as water concentration starts rising in the blood, in the body fluids, ADH release is gradually slowed down, and water potential, when it becomes normal, ADH molecule release is almost shut down. There are certain circumstances when blood water potential may rise, may be higher than normal, and this is because a person is drinking a lot of water, or there is more respiration occurring in the body that is releasing water, and that water becomes a part of the blood. So in that case, pituitary gland releases very little ADH. So very little ADH means very little water is reabsorbed. More of the water is lost, is allowed to be lost along with the urine. So in that case, urine will be released with large volumes of water. Remember one thing, when there is a shortage of water in the body and more ADH is being produced in order to reabsorb water from the urine and return to the blood, so in that case, urine produced is in low volume, it is concentrated. Whereas when there is high water level in the body and less ADH is being produced, so in that case, urine produced is with large volume and it is dilute. So in a way, you can say homeostatically, under influence of ADH hormone released from the pituitary gland, water level in the body are maintained, and it helps in the bodily activities occurring at its normal. So this was about osmoregulation. So in this discussion of homeostasis today, we discussed about thermoregulation, glucose regulation, and osmoregulation. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for further updates.